Here she goes. Sometimes I'm not sure if she's going to say recording in progress, but
Right.
well, welcome to Talk Openly. I'm Jac, and I'm really happy to be here. As always, I'm joined by my lovely and excellent friend, Daniel. Hello, Daniel.
Hi, Jac. Hi, everybody.
And we have a part two, which we don't often have part twos. But last week we started talking about the Noble Eightfold Path. And like pretty soon into it, like I realized like, man, this is going to be hard to crunch into like 30-35 minutes.
I was like, hey, maybe we can just like rush through it. But then you're like, no.
No,
Yeah.
we could really do, a single show on each one of the points and really break it down
You
easily.
could probably do an entire, like an entire show, like not just one, like a whole
Like a whole
show about
podcast.
each one of them, right? Yeah.
Really, yeah, 100%. Yeah. That is not what we'll be doing tonight, but we are going to continue our kind of, our skirting the surface of this glorious path. And I think we have 3 or 4 left, which they're good ones. They're hard though. We have 5 left? Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I think. Okay, we're gonna have to focus. But if we can't, we can always do a part 3.
Oh yeah. It's here. We'll do what needs to be done.
Absolutely. Yeah. But before we do that, I'd love to check in with you, Daniel. You gave the talk on Sunday at the temple, and I just want to see, how did that feel? How did it go for you?
It was stressful.
Yeah.
So no, it was the name of the talk or the show, or not the show, the name of the talk that I gave was actually Talking Openly, Vulnerability and Transparency on the Path. So there's a little play on the name of our show there, which was part of the inspiration for the talk. But no, it was really kind of amazing. I haven't given a talk in a long time, where I have to be like live in front of an audience and all of that. And so I was really nervous, and I had all kinds of apprehension, like thinking, oh no, I'm not going to do so good. And I had actually written it up as a manuscript instead of just like an outline, which, I kind of like, I know in my mind, like I knew as I was doing it, I was like, I know that this is not the best way to do it, but I was like, I can't help myself. Like there was something about having all of my thoughts out there. Like I could come back to it if I need to. And it was really cool because right before my talk started, Patty was sitting right next to me, and we were just chatting a little bit. And she said, yeah, because I told her something about having the manuscript there. And she said, yeah, that's how I did it the first few times too. And she said, I was so nervous. I just read the whole thing. I just kept my head down and read the whole thing. Right. And then I was like, it really like relaxed me. Her saying that made me feel very like, oh, right. It's okay. It's fine. Like no matter what happens, it's okay. And so that actually allowed me to kind of look up and speak a little bit more, just like I knew I knew the material well enough, and so I didn't feel like I had to look down quite as much at my manuscript. But it was really cool. There were quite a lot of people in attendance, and and so it was really nice to like look out and see everybody's like smiling faces. And there was this point where I was talking about our friend Sue Forster and about how important she was and is in my journey on this path. And I had no idea, not even once did I consider the fact that I might choke up during the talk. Because when I was preparing for it, I didn't, I was like, yeah, she was like really important to me, but that was it. But she was sitting right there. And then we were both kind of choking up at the same time. And I was like, oh no, I did not prepare to be this vulnerable in front of everybody,
Yes. Yeah, it was such a beautiful moment too. And, and I loved that. So you talked about Sue, but you also, talked about a couple other people, maybe directly or also just kind of indirectly about the song itself and different groups that you go to and whatnot. And it just felt like so much of your talk was about that relationship with the Sangha, and this interdependence. And, because something that I was really reflecting on during and after your talk was how I felt like when I came to the temple, I was kind of coming to this thing that had already been established. Like it was like a set group, and I was kind of like, I felt a little bit like an outsider until I kind of dove in. But of course, what's happening, and in any organization or any group that we enter, it's a dynamic, unfinished thing. It's something that we are also co-creating as we enter and engage with it. And so I love that, like, your story of your journey was also the story of the Sangha, which is
Yeah,
so beautiful.
I'm glad that you felt that way, because I felt the same way. I was like, I really felt like it was this, I didn't want to call out everybody by name, but my goodness, like there were so many people that I was thinking about, in terms of like, how we support each other and how like we inspire one another. And it's exactly that. We're co-creating the experience as the song.
Right. Yeah, it's interdependence, very
Yeah.
visibly at play,
Yeah.
that we really can't unlink from one another.
No, no,
Even
no,
if we
for
were to,
better or worse.
yeah, I know. Even if we were to totally like leave the Sangha, that's still a form of relationship with it that's
Right.
influenced our lives and influencing our trajectory. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a lot of there's been a big sort of like this like week or past couple of weeks has been a big focus for me on both interdependence and impermanence. So there's this sort of like blend of the two where it's really becoming a lot more salient.
Mm. That's good. That means that you're reflecting on it, on
Yeah.
a regular basis rather than it just being like, it's an idea. I've heard that,
Oh yeah. No, no. Well, life has a way of teaching us. So
Yeah, yeah, totally.
so
Anything particular this week?
oh well, definitely all the reflection for the talk was a big part of the interdependence aspect of things. But yeah, no, it's been kind of a hard week because I run a business with my brothers, and it's been a tough, like we've had some financial difficulties,
Yeah,
and that has led to having to make some decisions that impact ourselves and impact people that we work with and care a lot about.
right.
And that's hard. That's really hard. And then what happens is I see all these like dependencies, right? Where I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all these people like dependent on me over here, and there's all these people dependent on them over there, and it's all, I can see that how it's like this big web, everything's sort of like connected. And so when things shift, they shift for everybody, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so a lot of times so it's been kind of cool though, right? Like in the sense, my meditation practice has been just such a wonderful thing to have going on, and I haven't let go of that at all. In fact, I was practicing at the temple on Monday, um, and I had this like really beautiful experience where I had a lot of sort of heavy thoughts on my mind, and all of this stuff felt like deeply personal, and there was like a me and a them and all this. There was like a whole, you can just imagine, right? And so then, it was really this beautiful, like watching it sort of like calm down, and then watching this sort of like, like, no, like we're all in this together, sort of for better or worse, right?
Right.
Yeah, and the reality of it, sort of like there was like an experiential sort of moment there where it wasn't all conceptual. It wasn't just like philosophizing or thinking
Right.
about it, right? Like it was this really lived experience where it like settled deep, like it went from my head into my heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
felt it. I was like, oh, it's sort of breathtaking,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When we discover these truths, not discover, like not just like reflect on them, but like reflect on them to the point of really experiencing them, it means something quite different than just talking about it in a philosophy class.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is what this path requires of us. is that we not skirt our lives, right? Like we can do so much intellectualizing. I know we've talked about this on the show a lot. You know,
Yeah.
I certainly have that tendency, including, you know, not just Buddhism, but also like therapy.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes in therapy, I'm just like talking about therapy, right? Like I'm not doing the work and or not applying it when I get home. And so we can do this all the time. But yeah, when we can really see our lives and be able to integrate with the Dharma, bring our lives to the Dharma, man, that is the practice.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and of course, meditation is the practice that we do kind of in the lab, you know, in the gym, so that when we meet those situations, we can really understand them. And it sounds like, yeah, you've been able to really sit with that in kind of a beautiful way and really
I find it,
understand it.
yeah, it's quite beautiful, right? It's sort of like I was saying last week about the, you know, the passing of my daughter's cat, right? Where there's, you know, when we don't engage in all the stories and all of that, and we're just present with what is, it can be sort of profoundly beautiful, you know? Yeah. And, you know, the other thing that I have to point out that I like, that's really hopeful, I think, and that is sort of is the proof in the pudding for this entire path, is that the other thing that is noticeable and quite palpable is seeing how this experience of these truths, right, when we really integrate it into our lives, uh, how you could see the suffering aspect of it give way, right? You can see, like, on the one hand, oh, this is how my mind creates some suffering around this. And then you can, if you really practice, then there's this sort of sense of like, it's not so bad. It's okay.
Yeah, 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 and that yeah, there's just more of a realistic
Yeah.
perspective. There's kind of maybe developing our equanimity,
Yeah.
so that it's not so shocking, all of these twists and turns.
Exactly that. Yeah. So anyway, that's what's going on in my world. What about
Nice.
you?
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I have so many more questions I want to ask you about your talk, but maybe we could do that uh another time. But or
Whatever.
one, can I have one more? Okay,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to
sure.
okay. Well, something you shared that I thought was like, gosh, I really want to hear more about that is, you know, how you came to make the decision to shift from more of that secular commitment, you know, like you did the entering like the stream entering kind of
Yeah.
ceremony where it was like, okay, I'm committing to, you know, reduce my harmful action and to, like, you know, work on being a helpful human,
Yeah.
which is wonderful. And then there's like the refuge path, which is, now I'm committing to this particular path.
Yeah.
um and what was it that like shifted you into from secular to more kind of that commitment?
It was the realization that so what had happened was, you know, for I'd say all of my life, or at least all of the life that I remember, um, there was this terrible question that I never could answer, which was, what do you want? And it was, you know, like there wasn't anything, right? I think I may have talked about this on the show before, but there was just like nothing at all that I really wanted, you know, no matter, I did, it wasn't that I didn't think I could have it or get it or achieve it or anything, but it just kind of felt like there wasn't anything special enough, you know, like I'm so special, there's nothing that special or whatever that, you know, that I really want to aim towards. And so there was this like drifting quality to my life, you know. And I sort of was resigned to that. And then with some, you know, more reflection on it after entering the path, that was just, you know, the entering the path ceremony. But what happened was I had this sort of like aha moment where I realized, I was like, oh, right, the Bodhisattva vow is actually deep down inside. That's what I want.
Mm.
Like and it wasn't sort of like I was well aware of it ahead of time or anything, but I was sort of like, oh, that's not for me, because I, you know, whatever. And then I realized, I was like, when I really stopped, I was like, no, that ultimately it's the only thing I want. The only thing that crystal clear I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that I want that. And what in order to allow that to happen, I had to first sort of drop the specialness of me, because actually deep down inside, that's what we all want, right? And so there was this recognition of this shared quality of like, where I was like, oh, right, like I get it, like actually deep down inside, we really, really all want the exact same thing. We're just completely misguided and delusional, right, about it all, right? We misinterpret it or whatever. And so I had to sort of like give up this notion of like my own specialness and be like, no, really, like it's just clear to me that that's actually what I want. And so that allowed me then to be like, oh, well, and I see that what's gotten me to this point is, my participation or the blessing of seeing or being with the three jewels, so to speak, right? Like of discovering it. Like I don't know how I got here. It must have been some good karma, that led to this. And so like it was this realization like that, like this is how I got to the point where I realized that this is what I actually want to do. Like, and I'm more than happy to, to commit my whole life and all of my lives to that, right? Like that sounds really like just perfect. And so it was like that, and then at that point there was just sort of this like, okay, well, in order to, take refuge, will I be able to satisfy myself that I can actually take those vows, all of them, and live up to them. And some really good discussions with Lama and Darshan made it very clear that, of course, I can.
Yeah, totally. Wow, it sounds like you really discovered some renunciation, or I guess what Lama, prefers to say is like definite emergence. Like,
Yeah.
That whatever it is that like you have been rushing after is just so unfulfilling.
Yeah.
And I think that's also, partly what led me as well, is that, I was thinking about all these things that I tend to go after, still do, particularly, praise and good reputation. So people's like perspectives of me, that when I really think about it, it's like, God, it's just so empty. And really reflecting on the, the four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma, like, okay, people's perspectives of me are very shifting. That's impermanence, right? And yeah, so just like really digging in, like, what are these things that I've been going after, and are they making me happy? And so kind of emerging from that.
Yeah, well, I think that first part that you mentioned, that what am I going after? I think that I'd been living in this long limbo state because I discovered quite a long time ago that none of them were worth going after.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was doing it. So there was still like me pursuing all of that. But it was really kind of half-hearted with knowing like this isn't going to work out. None of this is going to work out. Right.
Yeah.
Like, so so that's where I was just like, I don't think like I was just sort of adrift, right? Like there was this sort of sense. I remember writing something in my journal about that, right? About like before I committed to taking refuge, where I was like, it really is like I'm just adrift in this, this sea, and it's just kind of like it has all these aspects of being lonely and scary and overwhelming and confusing, and you don't know if you're going to get out alive, all this kind of stuff, right? And then there was this sense of like, no, and there's a ship, there's the Dharma ship right there, and there's someone throwing me a lifeline. Like, do I get up on that thing or do I stay in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm glad that wisdom prevailed.
Me too. Yes. Yeah, we can really I mean, that is a scary place when like maybe we've recognized the total hollowness of the things that we're chasing after, but we don't have an anchor or a path or something that helps us learn and grow. That's terrifying,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
is.
that's nihilism, right? Like that is
Yes.
totally
Yeah.
the path of nihilism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I was deep in that.
Yeah. And it totally makes sense that, substances were
Oh
like a
yeah.
path for a while,
Heck yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, just gonna numb this out because this is
That's right.
terrible.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No doubt. I'm sure that there are many other people doing the exact same thing right
Yeah, for sure.
now.
Well, thank you for sharing a
Of
little bit
course.
more.
Yeah.
It's really, yeah, I love hearing your story. Um, yeah, it's
Hopefully it
good.
was helpful to somebody. It sounded like it might have resonated with
I think so. Yeah,
you. Good. Well, thank you for the feedback.
absolutely.
Tell me
Yeah.
about you now. Come on now.
Um, it was really great. Last week I kind of shared a little bit about just uh how intensely stressed I've been the last couple months. And um it's not that, yeah, my conditions haven't changed. Like there's still very stressful things, and I still kind of give in to the stress, but it was really nice, like, to talk more about Sangha. Like, I felt that, your support last week, and you also mentioned Tonglen was really helpful reminder. And so I've been doing Tonglen when I think to do it, which is, I, I think, a very crucial practice for me, because of how hard I am on myself, and also how much kind of self-hatred I have.
Mhm.
Really need to develop some kindness. And also, a friend of ours from the Sangha messaged me on Wednesday after the show, and just, shared a lot of love and also some ideas for what he does when he's very stressed. And
Aw.
so it was just really lovely to get so much support. And then the next day, on Thursday, I had this really intense moment, really kind of a culmination of my stress, where I think, because I also, I have ADHD. So many of us do, right? But uh when I get really stressed, I just like leave stuff everywhere. Like, I in random places, like I just totally lose like control of so much of my stuff. And I was at the grocery store, grocery shopping, and I get home and I realize I don't know where my phone is. I've put away the groceries. It's been a few minutes and I don't know where my phone is. So I go back to the grocery store and, like, ask the front desk, ask the grocery cart person. No one's seen it, of course. And I got in my car to drive home, and I could feel like the rage like boiling inside me. And I was aware of it. I was conscious of it,
Yeah.
and I gave into it. I just like gave into it, and I just in my car started like screaming, like yelling, like
Man.
cursing at myself. And it was very intense. And usually what would happen before, like 6-7 years ago, like before I met the Dharma, is that I would kind of just stay in that place of self-hatred. But what happened this time around was that in the like 3-minute drive back to my house, that also, like, it culminated in that, like, I felt this deep sense of sadness. Like, oh my gosh, like, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I am harming myself. I'm engaging in self-harm right now. And so I just, I really like practice some forgiveness. I reached out to Lama. I texted Lama and shared what had happened, and asked, like, should I do Vajrasattva practice? Like, what do I need to purify? happen. And, he said, like, sure, do Vajrasattva, but also self-compassion, exclamation mark. Right.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
And so I did both of those things. I did a Vajrasattva practice, but also did Tonglen, and really visualized, my suffering being transformed by bodhicitta at my heart, and then giving myself back everything that I need. And I think those moments are both like horrible and also maybe kind of like a moment that you had last week as well. Like, they're different, right? But like with you, the choices that you have to make because of your business, and how that impacts people that that work for you. And in this case, it was all, it was very different situation, but still like this kind of, impact that of recognizing, wow, this event, and how can I learn from it, or just recognize what's happening. And it's just, for me, seeing myself as imperfect, and that's okay, is so important, because I am a perfectionist, a control freak.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I got home and the phone was on my kitchen counter.
It was a teaching.
It was a teaching, yeah, and a reminder, that like that whole thing that you would never tell a friend the same things that we tell ourselves. That was such a perfect moment of it.
Yeah. Wow. Did you, when you were in the rage, either before, during, or after your sort of expression of that rage, did you sort of, like, when you were like, because you said you were aware of it, did you sort of see the sort of undiluted, sort of clear, crystal clear sort of wisdom that sort of underlies that emotion?
I don't know. I can't say that I was conscious of that. No. But what was interesting is that being aware of it, I think really it made it so much shorter, right?
Oh yeah.
The duration and the intensity, and like the longevity of it, right? Like it wasn't gonna stay in that form. And I was kind of engaging in Lam Rim too at the moment, like thinking, this isn't worth it, like, is this moment, turn this into the path, right? Like, that everything, that I experience needs to be turned into the path, because it is.
Yeah.
And so I was reminding myself of in the moment, like when I was just like raging, that like, this isn't worth it. Turn this into the path. Like this moment, like F your phone, right? Like, it doesn't matter. And so that it was good, it was a good moment, I think, all in all. But yeah, just intense, man.
Right. Oh my God. Those intense moments that, like, they do really let us see something about ourselves very clearly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Thanks for sharing, Jac. I'm glad that you found your phone.
Thank you. Yeah.
I know that feeling though.
Yeah.
I know that feeling where you're just so mad. It gets so frustrating, like nothing's working out and life is hell, and then you're like, oh no, it's like right there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think another thing that happened that day too, that was like, okay, maybe I've met my capacity, is that I also had a really intense therapy session earlier in the day, and we were talking about anger too. And so I think I was just like, F it, I'm just gonna rage right now, just let this part of me out. Yep. Yeah, it didn't work the way I wanted it to, which is to actually like have some relief, right?
No.
Yeah,
that's all right though. It was an experience.
It was. Yes.
I'm glad that you survived it.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there's nothing really wrong with anger. It's a fascinating emotion. I think one that like deserves greater investigation. So as much as I don't want you to lose your phone or anything else like that again, I hope that you get to experience that anger.
Oh, I definitely will. I'm sure within the next month.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. You'll get, and each time you'll remember, like, oh, right, it's not worth it, not worth it. It'll get shorter, and then it's sort of the obstacles sort of like fade away like fog.
Right, and also too, like that, the energy of anger, right? Like if I can really feel it without like launching into that tirade, it's so like powerful.
Yeah.
And so can I feel it and just like, bodily and like emotionally, what are all the things that are coming at me with it, or that I'm, creating inside myself. It can, like you said, it can be really fascinating to explore any emotion that's, so potent like that.
Right, man. When it hits like that, that's like a surfer getting a big old gnarly wave, right?
Yeah,
like catch that thing and ride it.
Right. Yeah, see where it goes. Try not to harm. In fact, do your best not to harm. Yeah.
Right. Well, the harming yourself or others as a result of anger would be allowing the wave to crash you into coral or whatever, right? But you can learn to ride. You are learning to ride it.
Right. Yes. I'm gonna learn to surf,
and then you'll teach the rest of us, right, Jac?
We all got to do it ourselves. That's the thing. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You'll help us.
We can all be alongside each other.
Okay.
I think it's time for Lojong, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, let's do it.
We're all really creeping up on the time.
We're gonna have a third session here, right?
I know.
Ooh.
Oh, I like this one, partly because it's simpler than the other ones we've gotten recently.
Right.
But also very deep, right? Okay, so 25. Don't talk about others' weak points. So Thupten Jinpa says, this states that you should never speak of others' defects, neither their worldly defects, for instance, by calling them that blind person, nor their spiritual defects, for instance, by calling them that morally degenerate person. I like it. This is good stuff.
That's pretty darn clear too, right?
It is very clear.
No interpretation really needed there.
Right. That one is like, I think, kind of the underpinning of the work that I do, like my employment is, as a peer counselor, we're in the recovery world, which is very different from the medical model. So the recovery world is very focused on what are your strengths? What are you already doing well? What can we build on so that you can have the life that you want? And I think it's a really nice connection here, is that, we don't need to talk about the weaknesses. We can actually build each other up, and talk about our strengths and what we already have going well. And I think here too, it's really about like, what does that do to my mind too, when I'm focused on another person's problems? Is that I'm just seeing all their shit and I'm not looking back at mine, which that's the only, shit that I have control over.
Exactly. You got to ask yourself why you're doing it in the first place, right? I mean, even just talking about others, period, right? I think that a lot of times there's ways that we sometimes talk about other people where maybe we don't think that we're necessarily being critical or talking about their weak points or whatever, but it's sort of like underhanded or couched way of doing just that there's some hidden judgment or like something that we kind of want to like point out about them not being as good as we think they ought to be or something to that end, right? Like there's oftentimes it's kind of just like nestled in there, even in what appears to be somewhat sweet ways of saying things. In fact, my kids were talking about that they were in South Carolina recently, and I wish I had some examples to give you, but they gave me a few different examples where people said things to them that were actually quite mean or rude or whatever, but they did this
Yeah,
very sickeningly sweet way, right? Where they were like,
right,
"Did you just say something mean to me? Like I can't
right.
quite tell." And I think that I
Bless
think
her heart.
yeah, exactly. That kind of stuff, right? Where you're like, I think that you're saying something mean, but I can't quite tell. And then my point is that like talking about other people's weak points is oftentimes just when we're speaking about somebody else, that's what we're doing, right? Like in many cases. So I don't know, to some sense, in some sense, I think it's like, don't even talk about others.
Right, yeah. Well, and there's also that piece of, that so often when we're talking about another person's, what we perceive as another person's weakness, right, is that it's actually we're holding up a mirror of the
Yes,
things that we're self-conscious
that's
of, or,
right.
things that we really need to be working on. I notice that all the time. And it's actually somewhat embarrassing.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Be careful. Those who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I find myself always like when someone has like kind of like controlling, or what I see as controlling or micromanaging, I'm like, oh, I
Mhm.
want that person off my back. But
Right,
then, of
right.
course, that's like one of like I'm so good at micromanaging. So yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we got a nice simple one this week.
Me too. Yeah, but potent. They all are.
Absolutely. Well, and it's right. The thing is that last week, I think that if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we left off on right speech. And that's what that's part of, right? Is making
That
sure,
is.
that we're not using harsh or divisive or false speech. We want our speech to be harmonious and pleasant and beneficial,
Yes. Non-harmful.
non-harmful. That's
At
right.
the least. Non-harmful. And if we can, helpful.
Right? Just like the Dalai Lama says, right? Try to be helpful at the very least, right? Just don't do harm.
Yeah. Which is harder than it sounds sometimes.
Huh.
Right?
But my goodness, doesn't that sound good if the whole world worked that way?
Yes, absolutely.
We'd all get along just dandy.
I think we can do it. I really do. So like I'm a little bit mystical sometimes, and I kind of believe in the like the mystical what is it? Nation of Shambhala, like this kind of mythical city, right, where everyone there is like highly on the path of enlightenment or enlightened, and it's just this totally functional society. Like I have this, I think because I'm a little bit more on the reification rather than nihilism side, that I'm like, yes, that is it, that's what we're going for. um and so I can totally imagine, yeah, that like, yeah, imagine what if really everyone was using their speech in ways that were helpful.
Hmm.
We can have a place like that. Yes.
Well, there wouldn't be any room for all the 24-hour sort of like news cycle and all the talking heads
Oh,
and all that.
gosh, no. How could we ever live without? Oh, man. Well, we should get to it, shouldn't we?
Let's do it.
Should we try
What,
and get through two?
let's see what we let's
See
see
we
what we
okay.
do.
And we've got, so coming up, number 4 is right action. So that sounds pretty simple, right? But not quite.
They all sound pretty simple, Jack.
Right?
Yeah, but it's weird. They're like, it's one of those things where you read it, you think about it a little bit, and you think like, well, yeah, I'm pretty good. I got that. But then the more you sit with it, the more that you kind of begin to see like, well, how does this play out in this situation?
Right.
Am I really actually like, how do I even know what right action is?
I know. Yeah. Well, and even so, I think one kind of like foundational cornerstone that really helps me with right action is the 5 precepts that I took.
Yes.
So that really helps guide right action for me. So, avoiding killing, avoiding stealing, sexual misconduct,
Yep.
use of intoxicants, and what's the 5th one? I lost it. How did I lose it?
Toxic. No sexual misconduct, so no killing, no stealing, no lying.
Lying. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good at that one. So maybe maybe I wanted to keep that one away from me. But yeah, so that really helps guide. But then, totally, like there's these times where it's like, well, maybe it's appropriate to do this thing, or could I, see myself doing it here? Or like, when I think when I first started thinking about these things, I was like, well, I've never planned to and hope not to ever kill another human.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that seems pretty easy, all in all. But at the same time, I've also thought, what if there's like a revolution and I need to defend myself? That's something that I might have to do. Or that, I accidentally kill bugs all day.
Right.
And so it's all kind of like these really challenging gray areas that we can do our best, but then
right.
have to be willing to be in the gray sometimes, which is really hard.
Yeah, and I think that we want to be able to reflect on it before the action if possible, certainly during the action if possible, and if not, at the very least after the action. Right? Like whatever it is. So like, ahead of time, sort of being like, if we were planning or contemplating doing something, then there's all kinds of, we still have a lot of opportunities at that point, right? To like kind of change our ways, because we actually, even though we've already kind of gotten going with the thinking about it, right? Like we can sort of still stop ourselves from doing something wrong by sort of just being like we were talking about, is this harmful? Is this helpful? Right? Like, how is this going to affect the happiness of myself and other people? That kind of line of thinking. And then there's like, like during the action as well, if it's possible to be somewhat reflective of it, like, if you can be mindful, like while you're doing things, and this is where mindfulness practice really comes in handy, right? Like if you can be mindful while you're acting, like when you're raging, for example, then you can be like, you can say like, oh, do I right now feel a sense of like inner peace and clarity about this? Right?
Yeah.
Like, because that would be those are like dashboard lights, like Lama says, right? So we like, if we can be mindful while we're acting, if it's not bringing us inner peace, right? If it's making us more confused, less clear, then maybe it's not the right action.
Yeah.
And then like after the action's over is like, do I feel remorse? Do I,
that's important.
Do I feel like guilt, or do I feel bad somehow about what I did? And all of those are sort of like good guides around right action.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's from what I've heard, karma is really complicated, but I know that one of the things that requires it for a karma to be like complete is like your intention. So like, did you intend, did you intend to steal? Did you intend to kill? Those types of things.
Yeah.
And of course, your action may have still done harm, even if your intention was not to do harm.
Yeah.
But it is different. And then, having regret, remorse, wanting to do better or do different. Yeah, I have this one. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I like the sort of the direction that you were going with it. I had made a little list of like signs that your actions might not be right.
Oh, yes. Can you share some
These
of
are just
them?
like phrases that I think all of us have used at some point or another that I think might possibly be pointing us in the other direction, which is like, well, like what you were saying, intention is so important. So a lot of times you hear people like oh, but my heart was in the right place,
Mm,
right? My heart was in the right place. So like it's like a justification. Like, well, my intention was good, and so the action didn't really like what I did is irrelevant somehow. Or I was just following orders. Hmm? If they hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have done this, right? Or some kind of sort of like moral relativism, like, oh, there's all kinds of like worse things happening in the world than just this, or so everyone else is doing it. Yeah. Anyway,
right.
those are some of the things I wrote down where I was like, yeah, those types of justifications might be like a pointer to the fact that it was not necessarily right action.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are very helpful. And for me, I think they're also paired, they're paired with that kind of like physical sensation of like,
Oh yeah.
where I kind of like, I just feel like this tightening
Yeah.
a little bit, and like a needing to double down. That's
Yeah.
usually, that's a sign, right?
Yeah.
Needing
You're
to
absolutely
justify.
right. You are so right. If you're paying attention to your body, body, your breath, right? You're kind of watching it, and then you'll see exactly that. There's a constriction that happens,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that constriction is usually a pretty good sign that maybe you should reconsider what's going there,
Yeah.
how you're acting.
It's really fascinating.
It is.
Yeah, I really hope that I'm never in the position where I have to defend myself, and have to make those types of like really hard decisions. And this is kind of a tangent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never want to own a gun. I just don't want to
Mm.
even put my mind in that, have that possibility in my
Right.
mind.
Right.
Um, but yeah, our world's kind of crazy though too. So it's like,
It is, and I think that that's where that kind of like reflection, even like ahead of time, is like, would I be like, am I going to be okay with the consequences, regardless of what those consequences look like, including perhaps taking on, some of that karma, right? Like related to whatever whatever the action is. But am I willing, like, am I going into this clearly with my eyes wide open? Like, I understand the consequences of my behavior here, like getting the gun and shooting the gun or whatever it is. um, and am I willing to actually live with that and accept whatever the consequences are?
yeah, as we talk about it, I kind of think I'd rather just die. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm,
Although I've heard stories anyway of, like how the people in Tibet would had to defend themselves in
yeah.
war, and that there were really difficult decisions that had to be made there. And I don't want to go into that because I don't actually know enough about it. But even just putting myself into like shoes like that, where I'm like, man, what do you do when you have to defend? You think
Right.
you have to defend. At least, what about when something bad is like? What if it's not about you, Jack? What, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so
Right.
here you have the means. Let's not call it a gun, but you have the means to put an end to massive suffering by taking an action that results in the death of like one person. It's sort of that sort of classic dilemma, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
and you're the one. It's up to you, right? Like, which is inaction? Which would you rather live with, the inaction, the consequences of that? Because that's still an action,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
right?
No. Yeah. I think that's the situation where I would take that action.
Right.
And there's that story of like the Buddha in one of, I don't know if it was in his like current Shakyamuni Buddha life or if it was a past life or something, but where he does take that action. There's like a captain of a ship, I think, who's going to like slaughter his crew. And so, he takes the action of killing the captain. But then, of course, what happens is that he has to go through the experience of all that karma,
That's right. That's
and
right.
and he does, he experiences that, and goes into like a harsh realm and has
Yep.
to endure that, and so yeah, reflecting on, are we willing to take that on, and yeah, and then also what, we don't know what would be the karma of not taking action, right? And so
That's
maybe
right.
we're just, that's our karma, is to have to make that decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the, what do they call them? The Jataka tales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, this is we kind of tangented, but I think it's good. It's
Such
interesting.
is our nature, Jac.
Yeah, I know. I know.
We are talking openly.
And there's plenty to talk about, so we'll
Heck
have
yeah.
many more shows. Right livelihood.
Mm.
So again, another one that sounds pretty simple on the surface. So, making sure that the things that we do for a living are not causing harm.
Yeah.
Um, and I was watching a video before this by Doug's Dharma, who
Yeah, I loved, oh, so
he's
good.
great. Yeah.
It's awesome.
He's an inspiration for some of what I've shared tonight, but uh he was talking also about how right livelihood is not just about your kind of like employment or how you make a living, but also how you use your money. So
Oh,
yeah. So like, are you holding on to it very tightly, not being generous? Or are you overspending and kind of like using your money to get a lot of
yeah.
stuff? And so I thought that was really interesting too, as part of livelihood.
That's fascinating. I did not think about that aspect, but it's true.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
true.
Yeah.
The other aspect to right livelihood that I think makes it a really interesting topic is that, so it's an interconnected world, right? And, especially within modern society, like maybe back in the old days, like, you could avoid being the weapons dealer or something like that. But nowadays, like so many industries go into supporting one another, right? Maybe you're, working at a factory that makes the parts that go into the missiles that go and kill a bunch of people. Or, maybe you're in a meat packing plant, but not a meat killing or, an animal killing
Right.
plant. Or, there's all these sort of ways that we might be somehow participating. So I'll give you an example. In my case, my business builds online or auction websites or auction software, right? And sort of as a rule of thumb, as long as it's not illegal, you're welcome to get started with us and use the software however you want. Um, and a company came along and got started with us, and then we're like, it turns out they're like it's all about it's like exotic animals that are being trafficked for primarily, some of the clients are like zoos and that kind of thing, but mostly it's like private ranches in Texas that want to kill some exotic creatures, you
Yeah.
know? And our whole company, everybody always feels so sad anytime we have to deal with it. We're like, why are we involved in this? And
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah, I'm like, I didn't do anything. I'm not trying to kill those animals. I don't, and they're not everything that they're doing is directly killing them, but there's something about that that's really distasteful to me, right? And not just to me, but to other people in the company, where we're like, man, how did we get involved in this kind of a business, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
imagine some conversations around like, do we continue? Like, is this
right.
we want to?
It's
Yeah.
totally not illegal. There's nothing, it's a, and some of what they do apparently seems okay, maybe, possibly. I don't know,
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's hard.
Mhm.
It's hard. But my point is that we're all engaged in some kind of work that might possibly be, supporting other people's livelihoods that are not right. Let's just maybe put it that way.
Totally. Well, and even my line of work, which is, mental health, on the surface, that sounds very great, very
Yeah, it
helpful. And I
does.
think for the most part, it is. And yet the history of psychiatry is very fraught with all kinds of harm, um,
Oh, so
and
much.
imprisonment and
Yeah,
torture, and still to this day, there's major problems with psychiatry, as well
yeah.
as how the American kind of psychology has spread around the world and really caused a lot of disease um,
Right,
by the
right.
spreading
Yeah,
of these ideas. And so, while I think my work on a one-on-one basis is right livelihood, there's ways that my livelihood came out of very harmful history.
Right.
Well, that's really interesting too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tricky stuff. Yeah, we do. We live in a tricky time. You know, like post kind of like industrial capitalism, you know, where everything's so divided and yet so connected. And yeah, it's the challenge of our times.
Well, and that's what really speaks to the fact that, so on the surface level, all of these kind of, it's like, yeah, I understand what, write this, write that, like live a good life, be good, don't be bad, that, be helpful, don't be harmful. Like it seems kind of basic, but I think it really on our end requires this continuous like reflection and like adjustment to the way that we're relating to others and to our world, like where as things become a little bit clearer to us, and as we reflect even more and things change, it's possible that we can make minor modifications here and there that make it so it's, so that you can live in this way that's like that, like that's in accordance with your own values and for the greater good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's how we create Shambhala,
That's
this
right.
society that cares for each other. I remember Lama talking at one point about Shambhala, and he mentioned that, there's still going to be lawyers. And I was like, what? Like,
what?
Lawyers in Shambhala? No.
Get out of here. Not in the mystical Shambhala, maybe in some other Shambhala.
Right. But yeah, this like so that there's conflict resolution, right? Like coming to kind of mediation or whatever. That yeah, there's ways that all of like we can really engage with our work in a way that supports others, no matter what job you have, even attorneys.
Oh God.
I know, I know some good legal workers, so I'm not dissing on at all.
Me too. I suppose, yeah, you're right. Conflict resolution is needed. Okay, I guess we can admit that there will be. Will there be butchers there?
No, I don't think so. I personally don't think so.
What about arms dealers?
No, Daniel. That's off the table. Yeah. And no distillers, there's not going to be alcohol.
All right. Yeah. None of those people taking advantage of like old people in their retirements, nothing like that.
No, nothing like that. But yeah.
So there's less work for the lawyers to do anyway.
Right. We'll just be able to have conflict around things that maybe are more meaningful or juicy.
Yeah, and maybe the lawyers will like help us to resolve conflict through debate, right? We'll have like Dharma debates to resolve conflict.
Great idea.
That's what the judge does, is like sort of like they weigh the debate. They're like, well, that lawyer makes some pretty good points about,
Yeah. I like this. We could do more imaginings, I think, for another hour. But alas, we have to end. That was really fun. I really enjoy kind of walking through this with you.
Yeah.
There's just so much here. Again, we could do shows and shows and shows on each one of these. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jac. We made it through 2 more points. Next week, maybe if we exert a little bit of discipline, which is the third category of the Noble Eightfold Path, then we'll cover right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration.
Great. Yeah, and I think this is going to be the one that's most challenging for me. It's the discipline one, effort, mindfulness, concentration. That's what I feel like I have the least kind of.
All right. Oh, it's going to be a good show then. All right. Yeah. Come back next week to watch Jac squirm.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too, and everyone out there. See you next week.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.